I need you all to make me famous.
Okay, let's go.
Hello and welcome back to Let's Crash Out. I actually, even though you can't tell because it started raining, did my hair and makeup today. So I figured, why not record another episode? I'm in my best secular Sunday clothing. It is Sunday, April 5th, Easter Sunday. And today we're going to crash out about the male loneliness epidemic. So this is another amazing, newly coined epidemic. And you'll have to excuse me, I am still stuffed up. Trees are still trying to kill me. The male loneliness epidemic. So recently, you start seeing everywhere where men are talking about how there is a loneliness epidemic because they're finding themselves more increasingly not in relationships. And I think it's really important to talk about the context of why this is occurring. So when you are listening to these male influencers, male social media presence, they're talking about male loneliness epidemic. They're talking about how women don't want to get married and have these traditional roles that they saw represented by maybe their mothers or their grandmothers or older generations. And there's definite statistical data that shows that originally it was more that people were waiting longer to get married. So the average age where individuals were getting married, you saw that it started in the early 2020s, was starting to be into the mid to later 30s. People are waiting longer to get married. They're waiting longer to start families. And then what we're starting to see now as we get into the second half of this decade is that not only are people not getting married, but women just aren't in relationships anymore. There's always this stigma of women not acting like what was represented to men in their childhood by either their parents or their grandparents. But I think it's really important that we look at the context of, if you take someone who is from my generation. So I was born in 1980. I'm in my mid 40s. So when my mom was getting married, if she had gotten married at what would have been the median or statistical average age to get married in the 70s, it would have been in her mid 20s. So you're talking about the mid 70s. And then if you look at her mom, when she was getting married, you're talking about, let me think here. Don't know how old my grandmother was when she had my mom, but we're talking about generational things. I'd probably say my grandmother was married twice. She died in 2006. 2016. Oh my God, 10 years ago. She was 87 in 2016. Let me do some math. 16 minus 87. She was born in 1929. I think she was, so if she was in her early 20s, that was like the 1950s. We'll say her first marriage was in the 1950s. And then I think my mom was 13 when her mom and dad divorced. And so maybe we'll say 13 plus another 2 years, 1964. So 1950s, 1960s, 1970s. That's the easiest way to figure it out. Um, at the time that my grandmother was getting married in the 1950s, um, there were no legal protections in place that exist today for women as far as like financial independence, prejudice from being discriminated against for positions. There's still so many things where, as females, we're not on a level playing field with men when it comes to working and the glass ceiling and wage disparagement. But in the 1950s and the 1960s, birth control was not legal or even widely available. Abortion was not legal. Um, Women could not open a bank account without their husband. They could not open a credit card. They could not purchase a home. They could not purchase a vehicle without having their husband as a cosigner. So, marriage as an institution in the 1950s, up until these equal protections came into play, was not always done out of choice. If you were having premarital sex and you were getting pregnant in the 50s and 60s, one, you didn't have birth control to even rely on if you wanted to prevent pregnancy. And then if you did become pregnant, you were either marrying the individual who got you pregnant, or you, depending on age, might have been sent off to visit an aunt and uncle for a few months, and you would put the baby up for adoption, and you would come back and act like nothing happened. And this was like the norm. So I don't think that like abstinence was something that was more prevalent during these times. I think that the sexualization of our culture was a lot different. So there really was a lot less of the sexual imagery and the provocativeness that you see just being in mainstream culture now. That's just normal, and we're so desensitized to it. But if you were getting pregnant in the 50s and 60s, you were getting married. Period. You were getting married. If you were having sex and you got pregnant outside of being married, you were getting married, and you were getting married very quickly. Um, and I think women at that time, I think we all can say like every single person that we've had sex with wasn't necessarily marriage material. They probably weren't even sex material. Let's keep it 100. So you have no birth control, you have no abortion, there's no reproductive health, period. You have a baby doctor, and that's it. And you're not even getting anything postpartum, maybe a prescription for Dexatrim. A great movie to watch to really look at all of these different like generational things with like how the dynamics of marriage and child rearing and things generationally is The Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood. I feel like I'm maybe not saying that title correctly. I'm going to need a production assistant at some point, because thank God I do this in front of my computer, right? Divine Secrets. Yes, Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood. It's also a book. The book is amazing. The movie is amazing. It stars Ashley Judd. It's great. And it really gives like a great look at like how these things, generationally were when it comes to marriage, child rearing, caring for children, about women's reproductive health, all of these things. So definitely add it to your watch list if you haven't seen it before. Um, and you have no reproductive health. You really have there's nothing for women. Like at this point, it was really, if you were going to college as a woman, you were going to college to find a husband. Like the ultimate goal and the ultimate end all for females was find a husband, get married, have kids. That's pretty much it. And as we start to move into these times and these decades where there's birth control available, and then you have also abortion becoming illegal, or becoming legal rather, where an unplanned pregnancy doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to result in you getting married. And then you start um, talking about the wage discrimination being a thing that is looked at, and the women's liberation movement that took place. As time goes on, as we move from when that happened in the late 70s, early 80s, women started seeing, they started seeing themselves in roles outside of wife and mother. So we're now at the point, if you take just 1980, the year I was born, 46 years removed from when these things are happening. And what has really happened um, is that women are just fucking protecting their peace, right? Um, I have some really amazing, strong women in my life, and some of us are married, some of us are in cohabitating relationships, some of us are single, some of us are in relationships non-cohabitating. I've got all over the spectrum. I have friends who are divorced and now just in relationships. I have friends who are divorced, not in relationships. I have friends who are divorced that are remarried, like myself. And the male loneliness epidemic has like really two parts to it. You have this whole socioeconomic part, with where women are choosing career over marriage and children, right? And you see birth rates are down, specifically in the United States. Um, the global economy, it's really expensive to have kids right now, and people are like making that choice, both single women, married women, of can I actually afford to have a child? Which, if you ever were really just trying to sit back and like decide that you were going to have kids based off of if you could afford them, no one would have them. But everyone is at a much different point because there's not this pressure of find a husband, get married, have kids. Like women are making these choices where they're like, I don't want to have kids. And it's not taboo anymore. I happen to be one of those people. I definitely can say, like, in my 20s, I definitely had a mindset of like, 100% I was going to go to college. I was going to get an education. I did phenomenal in high school, and it like wasn't even something that I thought about of like not going to college. It wasn't even on my radar. Like I was going to college, and especially in the late 90s, they told us go to college, get an education, get a good job. It was a lie, but they were pushing it real hard in the late 90s. Um, we can crash out about that at another time. And then, but even in college, there was always this voice in the back of my head that's talking and saying, I mean, I had a whole timeline of I want to be married by 25. So so I can have my first kid by this age, and then I want to have my second kid by this age because I don't want to be over this age when I have kids, and and like all of these timelines and deadlines. In addition to this podcast, I'm also have been writing a book for like 4 years now. It's really hard to write a book, by the way. It's like not as simple as you think it would be. And one of my chapters in the book is I can't remember exactly what it is, and it's downstairs right now. But it's like deadlines. I think it's just deadlines, timelines, something along, but just expounding upon the idea of like there's this cultural stigma in the United States of that you have to do expiration dates. That's what it's called. You have to be married by this age. You have to have kids by this age. And you have all of these ages and these limitations of when you have to do things by. And it's like, if you're doing them outside of those deadlines and expiration dates, like a gallon of milk, it's going to go bad. And I think with my generation, I think we're probably at the forefront of this line of thinking and this movement that has created the male loneliness epidemic. And all of the generations that come after us is that we just don't give a fuck about expiration dates anymore. Like, I'm going to do what I'm going to do. It'll happen when it's supposed to happen. And like, I have to take some of this pressure off of myself that I have to be married by this age and I have to have kids by this age. And like, that something horrible is going to happen if it doesn't happen by that age. It's maniacal, honestly. But I think the other part of the male loneliness epidemic that's like truly the larger part is that I don't know if these men's parents and grandparents, and I don't, and not intentionally, did any sort of justice to them by showing this example of what marriage was, because like the economic pressure isn't there anymore. The need to be married pressure isn't there anymore. The needing or even wanting to have children part isn't there anymore. We're not following this cookie cutter definition of what relationships are supposed to be, but you then also have men expecting that their significant others and their wives are going to take on these roles that they saw reflected by their own mothers and by their grandmothers. And like, we are not your mother's women and we're not your grandmother's women. I can get a credit card. I can buy a car. I can buy a house. I can work. I can wear pants. None of those things are not legal anymore. And men have gotten to a point where women are just like, no, I'm not going to be that wife. If that's what you're expecting, I don't know what to tell you. And I think that men are thinking like, well, I'll just go find someone. And it's not to say that there aren't women out there that still want to have these traditional wife and mother roles, but I think it's not as common as it used to be. And it's certainly not as common that there's as many fish in the sea out there for these men to find these women, because most women who feel that way are already married and have children. So they're not in your dating pool. And the male loneliness epidemic is like, this is what you want. That's not who I am. What you want from a partner, someone has already found. So you can just be by your damn self. And we don't care. I tell my husband consistently, I don't need you. I choose you because I don't. I can do bad all by myself. I lived an entire life before I met either one of my husbands and went through a lot of shit and did it by my damn self as an adult, living on my own. I can do it again. Women are choosing peace. They're choosing quiet. They're choosing to come home to messes only they've made. They're choosing to only have to be in charge of their schedule, what they need to do, and not have to be the house schedule appointment manager and the doctor appointment manager and the ballet lesson manager and the gymnastics manager and the soccer manager and the cleaning manager. And that's why there's a male loneliness epidemic, because anybody who is choosing to be in a marriage, have these traditional roles that were represented by their mothers and by their grandmothers, they're already married, guys. So, like, if you're lonely, maybe it's not an epidemic. Maybe you should look within. Maybe your expectations for a partner haven't evolved enough as everything else has evolved. Just something to think about. See you next time.